Okay, so first of all, if you somehow know me from my main channel, oopsie, sorry for not uploading on that for like 3 years. I am working on something, and it will come out eventually. It's not going to be worth the wait, so don't get your hopes up. If you're new, hello. This is the channel where I just vomit out my thoughts about stuff when my brain won't shut up, and also when I just don't feel like making it into a bigger video. So that's what I do here. Anyway, before I start complaining, let me just say that I love these two games a lot, okay? They're some of my favorite Sonics. I'm going to elaborate on that in a bit. You can skip this part if you want. I split this video up into chapters. So I love Sonic Generations. It's probably my favorite game in the whole series. It was the first one I played that really hit me in the nuts as a little kiddo, and I just found the boost stages just ridiculously replayable. There's so much depth to every one of them, and the controls make for such a high skill ceiling. It's fantastic. Sonic is so fucking fast, man. Without the skills, he's still pretty fast, but with the skills, he's like a speed freak, dude. It's almost too fast. I can just barely wrangle this little blue race car to do what I want, but man, it feels so good when I do. In Shadow Generations, it's the follow-up of my dreams, honestly. Force is just so disappointing, and Frontiers took a totally different approach, which I did like, but the cyberspace levels didn't really jive with me as much. Meanwhile, I feel like this is the Sonic game I've been waiting my whole life for, pretty much. A new batch of great levels, 2 acts each, with all the spectacle, refined level design, and attention to detail of Sonic Generations. They finally did that thing again with the 2D levels, taking great advantage of the 2.5D-ness to make them feel dynamic and cool and awesome like the classic Sonic levels. The Doom powers are all pretty cool and add a nice twist to the aging formula. Yes, even Doom Morph. Once I got used to it, I found it pretty fun, and I think there's even more room for me to get better with it, and I love me a skill ceiling. The white space is kind of what Frontiers did, but a more refined execution. It rips off Bowser's Fury even harder than Frontiers did, but like, I don't give a shit, dude. I like how it expands and gets more intricate as you play, and you find all these ways to kind of get between locations quickly. I mean, if you don't just fast travel. But, you know, there's also these fun little missions, and there's so much collectible art and music you can look at and listen to. Like, jeez, man. Just like Sonic Generations, it's a treasure trove of old Sonic crap. And, of course, seeing these old stages reimagined, most of them from Sonic games I don't like very much, is just as much of a treat as it was 13 years ago. I love the cutscenes too. It has some of the best animation I've seen Sonic Team pull off since Unleashed. As far as the remaster of Sonic Generations goes, well, it's really more like a port, but I do appreciate that they preserved the game as is for modern platforms, unlike what some other companies do. You know, let the kiddos enjoy this game. But I have nitpicks, and I wish some things were designed differently. By the way, let me just say up front that I'm sure a lot of this wasn't possible under the budget and time restraints, okay? This is just my hypothetical, ideal, wet dream scenario, okay? So I'm going to start with the technical stuff. On the PC version, it's pretty lame that you can't play Sonic Generations at 120 frames per second. I've just recently become a frame rate gamer, and it's great that Shadow supports 120. And I know it probably would have required tinkering to make it work with Sonic, and it's probably even more complicated than I give it credit for, but like, they probably could have done it. Maybe they still can do it in a patch, you know, who knows. Another weird thing, if you play the game on a high refresh rate monitor, even if, you know, it's only 60 FPS, but the frame pacing is very inconsistent. Makes it pretty rough to play, very jittery and stuttery. Setting my monitor down to 60 Hz pretty much solves the issue, but not quite 100%. Meanwhile, the 2011 version is rock solid, no little stutters. In both games, the graphics options are pretty lame. Like in Shadow, you can't improve the quality of reflections, the anti-aliasing is pretty limited, and you can't turn off the upsampling, which causes some artifacting around objects. You also can't increase the draw distance, which is still an issue because they use the same system as in Frontiers, so distant objects still just pop in instantly, no fade in or anything. It's less of an issue with how this game is designed, but still. Thankfully, modders have already fixed some of these issues. It also doesn't save your resolution setting if you have a monitor that's above 1080p. I have to set it to 1440 every time I boot it up. Lame. And this is more of a design choice, but the complete and utter lack of indirect lighting is pretty jarring sometimes, especially in the white space. But yeah, no ultra-wide support for either game. Not surprising, or does it affect me personally, but, you know, probably should be a standard feature nowadays. In terms of the console versions, I think PS5 and Xbox Series could totally handle 120 frames. I mean, Sonic Generations is 13 years old, come on. And even Shadow isn't really pushing any technical boundaries. I mean, I think it's still a pretty game, but, you know, it's not like, it's not crazy. Also, the Switch version, I was actually going to buy that one if it ran at 60 frames, because, you know, I've always yearned to play my favorite game on the little tiny little screen, ever since I saw it as a wee lad. But when I found out it was only at 30, it was basically a deal breaker. I'm not entirely sure if the Switch could handle the game at 60 FPS. Not a lot of 360 era games get an FPS boost when they get ported over to Switch, but I don't know, man. Based on my PC stats, this is a very GPU limited game, so if you can get it to run at 30, the CPU should probably be able to handle 60, and at least in docked mode, the GPU is a good bit more powerful than the 360s. In handheld mode, you could probably just run it at sub-native res or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty disappointing. At least both games look pretty good on the thing from what I can tell. Too bad the 30 FPS cap doesn't really work properly. Hopefully it gets a Switch 2 upgrade or something. If it ever comes out! Geez, Nintendo, I can't believe you'd actually produce a high volume of your system before launching it to prevent shortages, and like, develop games to spread throughout its launch year? What the fuck? Alright, enough discount Digital Foundry. What about the actual games, huh? Well, mainly I just want more. What can I say? It's never enough for me. I'm a typical Sonic fan. I've always dreamed of additional Sonic levels ever since the original came out, and, well, it probably would be hard to integrate them seamlessly into the story. Man, it would be sick. From past games, you know, Sonic CD, maybe Wacky Workbench, just like pick the worst one and try to make it fun. Something from the handheld games too, maybe Mirage Road from Rush. You know, they already did Water Palace in the 3DS version, and so far they didn't have any desert levels. Honeycomb Highway from Lost World seems pretty obvious to me. From Mania, I would do Studiopolis or Press Garden, although Studiopolis is another city, and boy do we have enough of those. And a level from Superstars 2, I guess. Speed Jungle? I don't know, I barely played it. Fake Sonic fan over here. And Shadow Generation's already adapted Frontier, so I guess that's covered. Obviously, they wouldn't do all this shit. That would be like a Sonic Generations 2. Sega, you should totally do that in like 10 years. But at the very least, I would do CD, Mania, and Superstars. 3 new levels feels right, bringing it up to 12. I guess they all kind of fit into the classic category though. Oh well, not my problem to figure it out. Maybe just leave them as extras, entirely separate from the campaign. No explanation or anything, just here are some levels. Enjoy. And of course, I wish they included another level or two in Shadow Generations. It's just so good. At the very least, the lack of Shadow 05 representation is pretty shocking, and 7 is kind of a weird number of levels, so maybe do a Lost World level if Sonic can't get one, maybe Honeycomb Highway. Like I already said, it's the obvious choice, okay? I'm just saying. Another 2 levels would probably mean another boss fight, so you could do a couple of things. You could do Infinite, maybe a boss from Shadow, the Hedgehog, or a Titan. Probably not Infinite, because that would create lore issues. Like, Shadow isn't supposed to know who that guy is at this point. So yeah, you know, maybe a Titan, or whatever the fuck Black Bull is. At this point, the game is going to get so full of content, you might as well just make it a standalone product, like charge $40 or something. And hey, if you're going to do that, you might as well spin Sonic Generations off into its own remaster, not just support. Colors Ultimate was stinky, yeah, but since this version isn't straight up replacing the original, I think it would have been a good opportunity to take a couple extra steps. Nothing crazy. I think the overall visual signature of the game is beautiful and really shouldn't be screwed with. The lighting and models are still great, you don't have to touch those. I mean, you could add a few more polygons if you want. The textures, they could be touched up. I don't know exactly how this works behind the scenes, but I think they could have improved them without recreating them, right? Like, they must have made higher resolution images to begin with and then scaled them down to fit the hardware limitations of the time, or something like that. So they could just do that again, but in a higher resolution this time. If I'm totally wrong about this, you know, let me know. Also, it's possible that Sonic Team doesn't even have those assets anymore. Let's just say that they seem to have a bit of a track record with that. Also, compared to Shadow Generations, Sonic has a bit of jank, just a smidge. It has less fail-safes that Shadow would go on to implement. Like, you can kind of just, if you do something a little wrong, you can kind of just fall off and die, and it's like, oh, what the fuck? Like in Speed Highway Act 2, you can like grab onto the helicopter later than you're supposed to, like right at the beginning, and if you go too fast, and it can just like carry you all the way away and you take you to the death plane, and you die, and like, fuck that shit, dude. So yeah, just little itty bitty little quality of life changes. Also, modern Sonic's controls are pretty lame for precise platforming. My muscle memory and memorization of the levels after playing for dozens of hours means it's not a huge issue for me anymore, but for a layman, it sure can be. And again, Shadow Gens trumps it in this area. Speaking of comparing these two games, there's just something about the way Unleashed and Gens did boosting that wasn't quite recaptured afterwards, including Shadow. Like I said, Sonic is so fast in those games, so it's pretty dang hard to take the most efficient routes. Besides the routes, there are so many little micro adjustments and efficiencies you can make to save even just a second or less. This ultimate sweaty gamer combo creates a feeling of ecstasy like no other when you just get that perfect run. That and drifting. Why did they get rid of drifting? It's so fun. Blue race car. Don't get me wrong though, Shadow is quite the improvement over Forces and Frontiers. He's still pretty dang fast. There are intricacies to the movement, and the level design is actually good, but it's still a bit more linear and automated than in Sonic Generations. And he's just too dang slow, man. Come on. Come on, you cowards. Make the skin melt off my face from the sheer force of the wind behind him. I dare ya. So yeah, if I was John Sega and I had the authority to tell these guys what to do, I'd tell them to take the Sonic Generations controls and physics and build off of that. Make the best of both worlds. But then this game would take like 4 years to make, or cost $1 billion to be made quickly, so yeah. Only hypotheticals here. So one more thing, this guy Taco on Twitter, he mentioned that in Sonic Generations, and well, Unleashed at first, but in Generations as well, the kind of design mentality of the levels is like, they're supposed to feel like real places, very lived in, you know? And one of the ways that it would do that is it would kind of create new parts and locations of, and like segments of levels that didn't actually exist in the original games, but like totally fit and make sense. Like in City Escape Act 2, there's like a rooftop park that you never see in SA2, but it completely fits and just expands the environment and makes it feel more legit and cool. And Shadow Generations doesn't really do that. I don't know what's up with that. Also, in Sonic Generations, because of the very well-realized environments, there were a lot of places that you just, I felt at least, kind of inspired to just kind of sit there and take it all in. Not so much in Shadow, and part of that is that Shadow Generations is like a pretty dang automated game, kind of. Like, it's better than Forces, you know. The parts that you actually engage with are a lot better, but there are still a lot of dash pads and dash rings and stuff, even, you know, compared to Sonic's levels. In several ways, it deviates from what made Generations very good, and it's kind of like a good version of Forces, which means it's still not the greatest, not my favorite, but very quite enjoyable, and I'm glad to see it as a return to form for the linear boost formula. And if they're gonna keep incorporating these kinds of levels in open zone games, then this is a very, very good enough sort of take on it that I can deal with. So that's all I could think of. We got a serviceable port and a great new game, albeit one that could have been like literally the best Sonic game ever, not gonna lie. Come on, Sonic team, why didn't you tune everything specifically to my tastes? Seriously though, guys, great job. I hope you can smooth some of this out via patches. With the rest of it, I mean, we live in the real world. Games gotta be made in a finite amount of time with a finite amount of money, and within those circumstances, you really knocked it out of the park, I think. But it is fun to imagine what things could have been like. Thanks to my buddy Sean for including some ideas about what they could add to Sonic Generations. He's a pretty creative, cool, funny guy. Go watch his videos. That's it. Am I gonna upload more to this channel? I don't know. If they announce fucking Switch 2 next week, I might talk about it. I don't know. Some fucking guy said he thinks it's gonna happen, and like, it's probably the last week that it could happen, and really you should just cut me off whenever you want. It's like, it's going on too long.